Well, today we're in Matthew chapter 5. Last week we were talking, Keith was leading us through the Beatitudes excellently. And I can remember one of the things he said was that, if you thought the 10 Commandments were hard, then you read the Beatitudes and you realise they are much harder. Because they're not talking about the letter of the law, they're talking about the heart and our attitudes. Now, we're getting more of the same in this next section. We're starting at verse 21, going down to the end of chapter 5. And we've got 6 things here where Jesus says, you've heard that this was said. That is, this is what the law says, but I say to you this. And you listen to what he says and you think, goodness me, if the law was hard, what is this? This is part of the Sermon on the Mount. And he's pointing out to us also what it means to be salt and light in the world. That's only the same section. We've just been reading about salt and light, about Beatitudes. It's all different ways of talking about the same kind of thing. This is all hitting our hearts. This is hitting our attitudes. This is hitting our secret places in our hearts, not just whether we are keeping the letter of the law. There are 6. We're going to read them. I'm reading the one on murder to start with, and you might think, oh, that doesn't relate to anyone here. As far as I know, but, you never know. I've met lots of people who actually have murdered people, and they're just normal people. Verse 21, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Now that starts to hit home, doesn't it? Again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka, which is kind of a derogatory word, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. There's a law for that. But anyone who says, you fool, now we've got other words, that I'm not going to name them all, but you can probably think of them. Derogatory words where we really want to put someone down. There might not be a law against it, but you'll be in danger of the fire of hell. In other words, God hears and God judges. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. I'm not going to read the next couple of verses in the interest of time. Okay, I used to teach at the Risdon Women's Prison. I'm still somewhere in my collection. Got an envelope that says Mrs. K. Rochester Risdon Women's Prison. I just kept it as a souvenir. It was my paycheck that came. That's the only proof that I have that I was inside Risdon Women's Prison, locked up temporarily just for a few hours when I was teaching. But there were murderers in the prison at that time. I have no idea who's there now because I believe those particular murderers have finished their time and have been let out. But, you get to know these people and, I got to know them in the course of teaching. And I have mentioned before that I've taught there, and they were guilty of murder. They did kill. And I also on the same day went to the Risdon Vale Community Centre and I taught women there. Both of them were teaching music. And in the course of teaching in that kind of context, people tell you their life stories and, it ends up music and stories all get kind of mixed up together. And what I heard from the stories of the women in the community centre, just across the way from the prison, was they were boasting about all of the times that they tried to kill people. Here we've got murder as a subject of conversation again, except that they hadn't quite succeeded. And I thought, what's the difference between the people on the inside and the people on the outside? It's just a question of who got caught and who didn't get caught, who actually achieved it and who didn't quite achieve it, and so therefore they're not in prison, not on the inside. You know, it all gets very blurry with this. And a lot of the people in Jesus' day, and I think we do the same today, are concerned with where are the loopholes in the law? You know, what can I get away with? How far can I go before the law actually says no? Like if I, damage somebody physically, emotionally, and in a lot of other ways, but I don't actually kill them, I'm outside the prison. It's like I'm in the community centre. You know, I can get away with it. I can boast. Look what I did, you know. Oh, I wish I'd got a bit further, but, you know. But if you actually kill the person, that's when the law comes in, and that's murder. Now, Jesus never said the law was bad. The law, Paul actually says the same. You know, we need the law to teach us about how to live well. It's not our means of salvation, but it teaches us how to live. But if the law is the only measure, then we're not coming up to what Jesus expected of his disciples, and nor are we coming anywhere near the way Jesus lived his life. And so Jesus points a finger. He said, well, what about all the steps that go way back before you get anywhere near the stage of thinking about murdering someone? Because most of us don't start there. I know there are some people in the world that come from that kind of atmosphere, culture, where they go there pretty quickly. We wouldn't. But so we need to backtrack right back here. How am I dealing with this difficult person in my life, in my own private thoughts? Where am I on this scale of anger? Yeah, sometimes we might just say, oh, I just get a bit frustrated. Well, I get quite a lot frustrated with a lot of things. Well, guess what? Jesus calls it anger. I get annoyed. That's anger too. You know, they're all on a scale. And I'm not saying that all anger is bad, or even that all frustration is bad. But we jolly well better work out what it is that we're frustrated, annoyed or angry about, and what constructive use that emotion can be put to, because sometimes anger can actually stir us to fix a problem, and that's when it turns out to be good. I know sometimes that has happened, and I've got so uptight about something. This is not right. No, it's not right. And so guess what? I better do something about it because I'm aware of it. And actually, I have it within my hand. I have the power to change it. That's when anger can be used for good. But anger that rumbles along, often quietly, can lead us to become envious. It can lead us to become ruthless. It can lead us to become hard-hearted. And we forget the person. There is a person involved that we're angry with. They might have done something really wrong, really stupid. There is still a person. And, you know, Jesus says, well, you know, God's going to deal with that. Then he goes on to talk about offering a gift at the altar, etc. In other words, coming to worship. This is really tricky, I think, because I can think of a couple of occasions when I've tried to figure out, well, what do I do here? And this time it's if the other person is angry with you. Not just if you're angry with them, but if you know that they're angry with you, and you also probably know why. Because you have done something that has made them angry. They might be angry justly. What do you do about that? Do I just say, oh, I'm going to worship now, and God will just forgive me for all my sins, and God bless everybody, including that man or woman that's angry with me at the moment, and I just sail through my life and then that's it. And Jesus said, well, I'm sorry. If you know a reason that somebody's angry with you, he said you even could leave worship. Go and sort it. It's that urgent. In other words, relationship needs to be fixed if it is within your power to fix it. Sometimes it's not within our power, and sometimes we jolly well know that no matter how many times we go to that person because we've already tried it, they're not going to listen. So then we need to pray, well, what else do we do? But this is Jesus trying to say, just because you are really upset, be careful, because that is a person. And if there is any way to fix the relationship, do it. I'm going to go on to his second category, which is about adultery. Verse 27, you have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully, or a man, who has already committed adultery with her or him in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go to hell. And in another passage in Mark, it also says, and if your right foot is causing you to stumble or whatever, then you cut that off. So you've got eye, hand and foot mentioned between those two places. You see, this whole, adultery is treated fairly loosely in our society in a lot of places. But Jesus said, you've got to be on guard. These things can happen very easily outside boundaries, whether it's sexual or anything else. And the sexual is the one he's talking about at the moment. And he said, you've got to be on guard. Now, that means Jesus himself, who was created as a sexual being, a man, also had to be on guard. And so when he mentions the eye and the hand, and I'm going to throw in the foot because he says it somewhere else, he's saying, if you see something that stirs you up and leads you into thoughts that are not wholesome, whether this is sexual or whether something else, I'm transferring it to other things too here, don't do it. Shut your eyes. Don't look at it. If your hand, that is something that you are doing, is also, whether it's clicking on the computer, whether it's picking up something that you know is not really good for you to do, and it is having that sort of effect, you can just begin to be aware that this is not wholesome. This is not helping me to walk within the boundaries that God has given me to walk in. Then stop doing it. Stop looking, stop doing. And if your foot is taking you to places that are not wholesome, same thing, don't go there. I know people who are trying to overcome their addictions to either alcohol or pornography or whatever, and they said, but the route home always goes past the pub and it always goes past the pawn shop and whatever. So what do? You take a different route home. You don't go there. It's that important. We must be very careful about our boundaries so that we don't make ourselves vulnerable to these sorts of things unnecessarily. The third thing here is divorce. It's been said, verse 31, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. In other words, do it legally. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for marital unfaithfulness causes her to become an adulteress, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, this is not the only passage about divorce. There are quite a few others. What Jesus is saying is go beyond the law. The law of the land might allow you to do this, but think again. Come back to think what is the whole purpose of your relationship and see if, come back to what is marriage for. That's where you've got to think. That's where you've got to start. That's where you've got to live in, not what can you get away with. I mean, in Jesus' day, there was two schools of thought. They were arguing all the time, rabbis, And one school of thought says, it can be for any cause that the man finds the woman unsatisfactory. For example, she might have burnt his porridge. Or he could see another woman down the street that he thought was more attractive. And so therefore he would just give her a bill of divorce. He would have met the letter of the law. But where would she be? How would you like that kind of system? I would not. And Jesus is coming out strongly saying, you don't divorce on trivial grounds, even if you can get away with it in the law. And we can transfer that to a lot of other things. So he names the one that everybody agreed with was, being unfaithful in marriage. But there is a whole lot of others that are allowed. And if you go back to Exodus, if, for example, the man is not providing food or clothing or conjugal rights, marriage rights, then he's got to let the woman just go without, penalising her in any way. In other words, if he's not keeping his end of what he promised to do in being married to someone, he's not acting married. So it's not really a marriage. So that is not against the law. It's not against God's law with that kind of divorce, because otherwise it's a marriage in name only and it doesn't. There's nothing more to it. And Paul says a little bit more too about other reasons too. But basically Jesus is saying it's got to be for a really, really good reason. It can't just be taken trivially. You can't just be thinking about the law. You've got to be thinking about the person. And you've got to see what you can do in relationship with the person. All of these are about relationships rather than getting away with a loophole in the law. The next one is about oaths, taking oaths. Some of you might know that there's a very strange little story in the book of Judges, or strange to us, where this guy Jephthah had taken a vow that, the first thing that came out of his house, he would sacrifice to the Lord. Well, to start with, that was the most stupid, ridiculous, foolish vow that anybody should not have made. Who came out? His only daughter. And so he told her that he made this vow and he had to keep it and he had to sacrifice it. Well, actually, he's not reading, didn't know the laws in the Old Testament very well, because in Leviticus it says if you do that kind of thing, you've got to get out of it. You don't carry out a vow like that, and there's a special sacrifice and so forth to let you get out of it. But, when I was at school, you might say, oh, yeah, I promised to do that. And then somebody will say, what do you say? Kiss your heart and hope to die or something? Yeah. Cross your heart and hope to die. Yes. It's kind of like saying, well, I really, really mean it this time. If I just say I promise, it doesn't really definitely mean it. If I just say I will, it doesn't definitely mean it. But if I say I cross my heart and hope to die, then, I'm making a vow and I'm serious this time. Well, I'll read this. Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but keep the oaths you've made to the Lord. But I tell you, do not swear at all. either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by the earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. And you certainly don't cross your heart and hope to die. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. Simply let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one, because you can get really trapped up with all the rest of that stuff. Be straightforward. Be honest. We need to practice living honestly. Now, living like Jesus is talking about is what he's calling light and salt. This is not the world's way, because this goes to the heart. This is making sure that our heart's pure in heart. Remember that from the Beatitudes? And that we are open and we're dealing not just with the law, but with, what's the bottom line? Love. We heard that today from Donna. Love. This is what this comes down to. That you're not just dealing with things legalistically, but out of love. Now, and two more. An eye for an eye. You've heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. If somebody wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. I used to find that extremely difficult, because I thought this just sounds like I've got to be totally passive and I've got to go along with whatever dreadful things somebody is asking me to do. It actually doesn't mean that. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Let's go back there. That's about the law. That's about how the laws in the Old Testament were made. Eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth was actually good. It actually meant that if you stole 5 sheep from your neighbour, you wouldn't be put to death. That kind of crime was not worth killing you for. You got killed if you murdered someone, right? There's a scale of punishments. We have it today in our law system. So therefore, if you stole 5 sheep, the punishment was you had to give 5 sheep plus a few more to also compensate that person for lost time looking for sheep and worry and all the rest of it. So you might give him 8 sheep or 10 sheep or something. But you don't lose your life. That's for murder. So if you cut off one man's arm, your arm gets cut off. So in other words, it's like for like. It's a punishment that fits the crime. Nothing wrong with that. But then if you go back and might say, oh, well, if you've done this to me, I'm going to do the same back to you, tit for tat. Actually, no. Because that rule, like for like or tit for tat and all of that, that applies in the law courts. That doesn't apply in our daily lives. We have no right to take revenge. This whole section is about taking revenge. No matter what evil someone's done to me, I personally do not have the right to go out and take revenge, because vengeance is mine, says the Lord. We look to him. He's the one that can bring vengeance, and in fact he will bring vengeance. He'll sort that out. I don't need to, and I should not, and I don't have the authority to do it. And in fact, if I did it, it'd go all wrong anyway. So what's this about? Showing kindness. It comes back to what Donna was reading out today. This comes back no matter what nasty people we're up against, even if somebody is, I just heard this week of a story. Somebody popped in from New South Wales, who's also on a holiday down here, and told us a story about this guy who was put in prison, a Christian guy, for a paedophile case, some kid was, attacked and murdered, etc. And this guy fixed washing machines, and he was in the house fixing the washing machine 2 days before. So when the child disappeared 2 days later, the police put 2 and 2 together wrongly and thought he must have done it. Well, where was the evidence? There was none. Absolutely none. And this has taken 7 years, where his name has been blackened, where he's been to prison, and all sorts of terrible things have happened, really terrible things, to him. And he didn't do anything wrong. He went to fix a washing machine. He had nothing to do with it, didn't have anything to do with this child. It happens. It happens all over the world, that we can be wrongfully accused and mistreated. I've had minor incidents of being mistreated and wrongfully accused, and it's pretty awful. I haven't had to go to prison and deal with stuff like he's been dealing with. But Jesus is still trying to say, don't forget the person. And who is accusing him? Probably the distraught parents who just simply want to put a blame on somebody because they are so upset that their son has had this happen to them. And we all do crazy things when we are distraught, or we all can do crazy things when we're distraught. Can there not be a little compassion towards the people who started this wrongful charge, because they themselves are victims of somebody else's wrong? We need to start to think more of like that. And the very last one. You've heard it said, love your neighbour and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies. And pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of the Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your brothers and your sisters and the people in the fellowship and, those are all kind, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Now, that last sentence is impossible, but, they grew up very much in a society that, the people who are our people, the Jewish people, the Israelite people, or whatever they were, they're the goodies. And they're the people we love. They're the people we help. But those people out there, the Gentiles, no, they're our enemies. You go to different tribes, whether it be Africa, or let's just take Africa for example, and you get the same kind of thinking. If their family of origin is in our tribe, they're my people. But anybody from another tribe out there, I can throw things at them, I can throw stones, I can even kill them because they're not my people, they don't count. That's a little bit extreme. But, it's not that long ago in Australia where even people coming from other countries, a little bit suspect. We've had it in our own family because we've got 2 foreign daughters-in-law. And in the hometown where Stuart grew up, they really didn't know how to deal with foreigners. That's true, isn't it? And so, lovely people, really lovely people, but, these foreigners coming in, can we trust them? Who are they? How do we deal with them? And so therefore, I was talking to our Thai daughter-in-law just this week because she had her 50th birthday. And, she's never met Stuart's family in Glennis because they wouldn't meet her. She's from Asia. That's all these years later. That bridge hasn't happened. She's a gorgeous girl, really lovely Christian girl. But they don't know that because at the time, they couldn't cope with somebody different outside. Now, these are Christian people. And our daughter-in-law is gracious enough to understand that people are like that in every culture, every culture. This whole racism thing is not just whites against other people. It's every single group against whatever other group that's slightly different, or one has hair a bit more curly or hair a bit more straight, or the kind of the differences that just go on and on. But Jesus is cutting across all of that. The last sentence, be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Now, going through all these things, I've been thinking back to various difficult times that I've had in my life, particularly when other people were attacking me for no good reason, verbally attacking me, I mean. How have I been? How have I reacted? I'm not perfect. I have not been perfect. I struggle with that. I might have been better than certain other people might have been, and so you can compare yourself like that. I want to be how Jesus wants me to be. And so I was very aware of that when we had communion this morning, and so I was asking for God to forgive me in different situations where, I think I probably did the best I could, but it still wasn't perfect. It still wasn't, the way Jesus would have handled it. And I think part of the point of all of this is to say to us, there is only one who could keep all of this perfectly. That's Jesus. This is showing us how much Jesus is so different and so countercultural, and his heart is so much more pure than any of the people of his time, and definitely more pure than my heart. And so I have to come back and say again, God, Lord, Jesus, please teach me. Change my heart, O Lord, and make it new. Make it be more like Jesus, that I can still, even when people are bombarding me with put-downs and nasty stuff, can be still focusing on how can I do good for that other person. You might not feel very warm towards them. It doesn't say anything about whether you feel warm. But will I do good in all of these situations and all the rest of them that we're in? That's what it's about. It's about our heart. And we're still not there yet, but I want to keep going in that direction. The direction of allowing Jesus to change my heart at a deeper level, to be more closely following him. Now, that's a very big chunk in a short time, but I hope you can see the theme in it. And let's not forget that this is our Jesus is telling us we need to be the light of the world. Because living like this and reacting like this is different. It shows something of Jesus' character through us and his heart through us. And it's not just about talking, being the light of the world. It's about our attitude. Salt too.